What happens when the most powerful man on earth tries to corner a nation of 1.4 billion people and gets humbled by calm conviction instead of chaos? Donald Trump walked into his presidency believing America could dictate terms to India. Trade deals, defense offers, sanctions. He thought New Delhi would fold just like countless others. But what unfolded was something Washington had not prepared for. India stood its ground. Enter Dr. S. Jaishankar. No theatrics, no shouting. Just a quiet, razor-sharp clarity that sliced through Trump's strategy like a knife through paper. Where Trump expected compliance, he was met with composure. Where he expected concession, he was met with confidence. And with one calm reply, the entire game changed. This wasn't just another diplomatic exchange. It was a global signal. The message was crystal clear. India is not a pawn to be moved, but a power to be respected. Reciprocity, balance, equality, these weren't just words, they were India's new doctrine. And for the first time in decades, America realized it wasn't dealing with a follower, but with a partner. One that demanded dignity on the world stage. And make no mistake, this shook Washington to its core. The world was watching. Beijing, Moscow, London. They all saw a rising India, unafraid of pressure, unafraid of intimidation. Trump's cornering tactics collapsed not with a bang, but with silence. Calm, measured, devastating silence. That moment wasn't about Trump losing. It was about India winning. Winning sovereignty, winning respect, winning the right to be seen as an equal. And it was about Jaishankar, the professor turned diplomat, showing that true strength doesn't scream. True strength doesn't threaten. True strength speaks softly, but leaves the world stunned. And here's the lesson. Power isn't about volume. It isn't about theatrics. It isn't about trying to bully others into submission. Real power is conviction. Real power is dignity. Real power is the refusal to bow even when the pressure is immense. India didn't just defend its interests that day. It rewrote the script of global diplomacy. It told the world partnerships must be mutual, alliances must be fair, and respect must always be two-way. So let history record this moment. When Trump tried to corner India, it wasn't anger that pushed back. It wasn't defiance for the sake of defiance. It was calm, it was clarity, it was conviction. And that reply changed everything, because in that instant, India stopped being the nation that adjusted and became the nation that demanded respect. And the world finally listened. Trump walked into global diplomacy with the swagger of a businessman who believed every deal was his to win. He treated the world like one big negotiation table where America dictated the terms, and others simply nodded along. He had used this approach with allies in Europe, with adversaries in Asia, and even with partners in the Middle East. In his mind, India would be no different. After all, he saw it as a market to be tapped, a military buyer to be persuaded, and a government that would ultimately bend when Washington applied pressure. So he tried to corner India. Trade was the weapon of choice. Tariffs, threats of sanctions, the ever-present undertone that America was doing India a favor. He thought he could tighten the grip and watch New Delhi scramble for concessions. It was the classic Trump playbook: squeeze hard, force the other side to blink, and then walk away declaring victory. But here's the problem. India isn't a country that can be boxed in by arrogance or cornered by bluster. This isn't a nation that spent 75 years building its sovereignty only to surrender it at the first sign of pressure. Trump miscalculated spectacularly. He assumed India would be desperate for American approval. What he didn't see was a nation that had grown into its own power, a nation that could stare down the so-called leader of the free world and say, "No, we will not bow." And that was the moment the script began to flip. What Trump thought would be a routine show of dominance became the stage for something far greater: India's assertion that the days of being dictated to were over. That was the misstep that set the stage for Jaishankar's calm reply. Trump's pressure campaign might have rattled some leaders, but it didn't even make Jaishankar blink. In that room, with all the weight of American power pressing down, he did not raise his voice. He did not rush to justify. He did not scramble for middle ground. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He stayed calm. Calm in the face of threats, calm in the face of a president who thrived on chaos. That composure alone was unsettling. Because when a man like Trump throws punches and the other side doesn't flinch, the room suddenly feels very different. And then, with almost surgical precision, came the reply. A single word that dismantled the entire pressure game. Reciprocity. Just one word, but it carried the weight of centuries of struggle for independence, decades of patient statecraft, and the unshakable conviction of a nation that knew its worth. Reciprocity meant balance. It meant fairness. It meant India was not there to be lectured, bribed, or bullied. It was there to engage on equal footing. If America imposed tariffs, India would impose tariffs. If Washington tried to dictate, New Delhi would respond in kind. Simple, clear, and impossible to argue with. That reply was not fiery, but it was devastating. It cut through Trump's theater like a blade through silk. No rant, no drama. Just a mirror held up to power, forcing it to see itself. It was the kind of moment that makes you realize real strength doesn't shout, it doesn't boast, it doesn't bully. Real strength sits quietly across the table and, with one word, makes the loudest man in the room fall silent. And in that silence, the balance of power shifted. What followed after that single word was not just a diplomatic response. It was a declaration that India had stepped into a new era. For decades, the assumption was that India would quietly comply, always careful not to upset the balance, always seen as the junior partner in the global game. But this time something shifted. The world witnessed an India that was no longer willing to be boxed in, no longer willing to play second fiddle. Instead, it showed itself as a nation prepared to stand shoulder to shoulder with any power, not beneath them. That moment revealed a mindset. Confident, assertive, unafraid. It wasn't just about tariffs or trade deals, it was about identity. By standing firm, India told the world partnerships are welcome, but submission is not on the table. Cooperation is possible, but domination is unacceptable. That clarity reverberated far beyond Washington. Beijing was watching, Brussels was watching, London, Moscow, Tokyo. They all saw a country refusing to bend, a country announcing through action, not rhetoric, that it demanded equality. Suddenly, India was no longer being spoken about as a balancing act between superpowers. It was being spoken about as a power in its own right. And what made it so striking was the manner in which it happened. No bluster, no threats, no drama, just unshakable conviction. That conviction sent a louder message than any show of force could have. It told the world that India's sovereignty was not negotiable, its dignity was not for sale, and its voice was not one to be ignored. In that moment, India didn't just respond to America. It redefined how the world would have to deal with it from that day forward. And here's where the true brilliance of that moment lies. It wasn't just about India scoring a point, it was about rewriting the entire playbook of global diplomacy. For too long, the world has been conditioned to expect that when Washington leans, nations bend. But India chose a different path. By standing firm with grace and restraint, it showed that strength doesn't have to roar. It doesn't need to posture. It doesn't demand attention. It simply commands respect. That single exchange became more than a clash of wills. It became a signal to every capital across the globe that the days of one-sided power were coming to an end. Trump had walked into that room thinking he was the center of the story. But when the dust settled, the story was no longer about him. It was about India, about a country that had the courage to say no, the wisdom to say it calmly, and the conviction to mean it. That is why it resonated so deeply, because it wasn't just a win for India. It was a win for the principle that every nation deserves to be treated as an equal, not as a subordinate. And think about the lesson here. Power is fleeting, bluster fades, theatrics crumble, but dignity lasts. The world remembers the quiet steel of a leader who refuses to bend far more than it remembers the loud proclamations of those who try to dominate. That is why this moment will live on in the story of modern diplomacy. Because in the end, one man tried to corner India, but it was India's calm, unshaken reply that cornered him, and that changed everything.